Good evening from Raleigh, North Carolina on Monday, October the 8th, 2018, recording this video shortly after 8:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Remember to make all decisions solely based upon National Hurricane Center forecast and products. And we are monitoring the progress of Hurricane Michael. It was designated a hurricane earlier today, and now packs winds, sustained winds of 85 miles per hour, and this pressure has dropped significantly from earlier today, showing a storm that is intensifying and continue to maintain its strength throughout the day, and is expected to gradually intensify or rapidly intensify through tonight into tomorrow, and all the way up until landfall somewhere up here in the Florida Panhandle, eastern or southern Alabama. Still can't be counted out, but somewhere in here. Even I should enlarge this to even include the Big Bend of Florida. In this area, we'll be looking probably at a major hurricane landfall in the coming days, per the National Hurricane Center forecast, which I will get to in just a moment. I want to break this video down into 3 sections. First, talk about what the storm is doing now, then go into the forecast section from the National Hurricane Center and the track of the storm, and then I want to focus on the impacts for North Carolina. First, let me start off just by touching on that subject and saying there will not be any storm surge impacts or direct, I guess coastal impacts is what I'm trying to say in North Carolina. This will solely be, after the fact. This is not a hurricane that's coming towards North Carolina. We will be affected by the remnants of Hurricane Michael, which would bring some rain and wind later on Thursday. But I will get to that aspect later in the video. But most of my viewers watching from North Carolina, the impacts we'll feel are not directly related to its landfall. It will be the remnants of the storm. So just wanted to clarify that. But jumping back to kind of where the storm is now. So we're looking at, this is a really neat tool. It shows the GOES East data. If I can get these drawings off of here. There we go. The GOES East data, the latest satellite we've put up into space. And this is the upper level water vapor view, and it kind of shows a very clear picture. You can pick out, Michael. The animation might be a little bit jumpy here. I have some other animations I'll show that might be a little bit clearer, but we'll work with this for now. And you can see a very healthy outflow on the north side of the storm as it's going out this way. You can definitely tell, the focal point of the image, it's pretty well defined. It's got a that swirl going on in the middle here, a big robust area of convection in here, signifying a pretty healthy storm. It is still battling some drier air and some wind shear from the west, so it's not taking advantage of as much as it could, which is certainly good news in terms of keeping the intensity at bay. But it is going to be traveling into some warmer waters into the Gulf of Mexico, and when I show the track in a few minutes, I'll kind of talk about some advantages or disadvantages to that track and how that relates to the intensity of the storm. But this was just a good slide to start off on to show where the storm is now and what it's looking like it's doing in terms of water vapor. So this animation won't be quite so jumpy, so I'll jump over to here. This site is called weathernerds.com. I always keep the URLs at the tops of these videos in case you ever want to visit these sites yourself. And this looks like it is the latest imagery here. And this is actually the shortwave infrared view. So it's nighttime, so we can't actually see, the visible satellite, which gives you that really clear picture of the clouds. We can't see that because the sun is down on this side of the earth right now, but we can, infer this from infrared imagery and see what's going on. So here's the western tip of Cuba. Here's the Yucatan Peninsula. Here's the Florida Keys. Key West is down here, and then here's the southern tip of Florida. And here is Hurricane Michael. It's a lot clearer to see the rotation in this imagery. I guess I should have started out with this image, but you can clearly see the rotation and these cloud tops that poof up and kind of pop out at you, almost 3D looking. And that's a sign of a very healthy core of the storm that has a lot of high clouds and thunderstorm activity around the center, which is kind of protecting that inner core and helps it to intensify further. I'll jump over to the infrared, another view of the infrared satellite in a moment to show you, we can see individual storms and things, but this just kind of gives you a full picture. It's grayscale, so it doesn't point out too many details. It just gives you a full picture of the storm and what's going on. One thing I want to point out, it does, the GLM is the Geostationary Lightning Mapper, if I have that correct. It's a tool that is on the latest satellite that we put up that we just looked at, and all these little yellow dots are actually lightning strikes that are detected by the satellite. And if you look really briefly, there's one little blip in here of lightning that occurs right there. If you can catch it, I'll kind of put the cursor over where it happens and we can watch it loop. But anytime there's lightning, in the middle of the system, that's a sign of, intensifying storm. And that's just one little blip. I'm not saying that it's, a ton of lightning is in the storm right now, but, there's thunderstorm activity going on all around it, which is, signifying a healthy storm. It's pulling in a lot of thunderstorm activity, and it has a lot of, the environment is very healthy for it to work with and to intensify. So that's something we'll have to monitor in the coming days. It is expected to intensify into a major hurricane before making a Florida landfall. So, this just provides a kind of a brief overview of everything. But if I jump over to the infrared imagery here, it's the same, same domain, I guess, the same map image, but this just shows a color-coded image of the cloud top. So the more black and the more purple the color, the colder the cloud tops are. So we're not looking at this end of the scale, we're looking way down here. And these are temperatures. I think they're in degrees Celsius here. I would assume they're in degrees Celsius. So this is negative 90 degrees Celsius. That's very cold. And that signifies that those clouds are very high up in the atmosphere. And what that tells us is that that's a very robust, very strong area of convection, and those thunderstorms are really kind of pumping out there over the southeastern Gulf of Mexico right now, and that kind of feeds into Michael's ability to intensify and keeping the inner core intact and kind of intensifying. So anytime you see these very big blobs of convection, we call them very big blobs of thunderstorm activity, that's a sign that the storm is still pumping, it's still working, and it's probably still going to be intensifying. So with that big burst of convection, if that continues to wrap around the center of circulation overnight, that will likely lead to some further intensification into possibly a high-end Category 1 or a Category 2 tomorrow. It's expected to gradually intensify and potentially rapidly intensify into a major hurricane by late tomorrow and make a landfall sometime on Wednesday. So I want to leave this section of the video of where the storm is now and go to the forecast aspect, because there's a lot to talk about here. So I'm on the National Hurricane Center's website, the only website you should go to if you're making decisions or any kind of official information. It needs to come from this source. These are the experts. They make a living doing this. This is their passion. This is the best forecast you can get. So here we have Hurricane Michael, maximum sustained winds 85 miles per hour as of the 8 p.m. update. It's picked up from some forward speed. So earlier, I think yesterday's video was moving about 3 or 4 miles per hour, maybe 5, but it's picked up speed to about 12 miles per hour north. So it's beginning to trek northward. It's past most of Cuba, and this was the location as of 7 p.m. this evening, and it will continue to march kind of northwestward. And this is one of the things I wanted to talk about. Depending on the very small difference in the very small differences in the track will depend on how long the storm has access to this very warm waters in the Gulf of Mexico. So if it makes more of this kind of swing out here, as portrayed by this forecast track, it has slightly more time than if it just made a straight line, like a beeline from here to the Florida Panhandle. It has a little bit more time and a little bit more access to those warm waters, so the longer it stays over ocean in this case, the more intense the storm is likely to be. But regardless of the exact track, it's expected to have enough time over open water to intensify into a major hurricane and pose some life-threatening storm surge and very high winds causing some structural damage, with houses being blown over, roofs being blown off, and things like that. And storm surge being a big impact there. The good news is that it is a fast-moving system and will continue to be so. As you can see on this graphic, each of these points are 24 hours apart. So it really, when it gets up into Florida and it really takes off because of a cold front that's sitting out here, will kind of push it out a little bit quicker. It's not going to be a Florence where it sits around for a long period of time. It's going to hit and it's going to get out of here. So that's good news in terms of the rainfall aspect. But the coastal flooding and coastal inundation and the saltwater intrusion from storm surge is going to be a big concern down in coastal Florida, where those areas are very susceptible to that in the first place. But also with a bigger storm pushing all that water up against that coastline is going to pose some problems for those residents down in Florida. So there's a couple of products we can look at on here, and I want to start off by looking at the wind speed probabilities. This has some implications for North Carolina as well, so I want to kind of transition into the North Carolina phase of the video and what it means for us here in North Carolina. This blob out here is actually Tropical Storm Leslie, which has been spinning out here in the Atlantic Ocean for I think about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks or so. It's not going to impact land, but it has been fascinating to watch it just kind of spin out there and go. So disregard this area. This is with a different system, but this is the track for Michael. And if I pull up, I think I can go to a blue color here and it might show up pretty well. So here are the probabilities for tropical storm force wind speeds in this dark, purple color. You may remember these graphics from Florence. The darker, the more warm the shade, the higher probability of tropical storm force winds. Now that means sustained tropical storm force winds. So that's anywhere from 39 to 74 miles per hour sustained winds. So think of it like a severe thunderstorm lasting for, hours and hours without a lot of lightning. That's the kind of one way you can think of it. It's just a prolonged period of wind when we say sustained winds. So, anywhere in here can expect, a prolonged period of tropical storm force winds. But then you notice up into North Carolina, some of these yellow shades and kind of gold shades are getting up here into 30 to 50% range. And that will continue to kind of protrude into North Carolina because the remnants of Michael a consequence of it moving, the good thing about it moving fast is the lower rainfall totals, but the consequence of that is that it still will pack a punch when it gets here in the Carolinas, because it will have scooted from here to here in about 24 hours, and it still has a lot of momentum to wind down. It still has a lot of strength to lose. So when it's up here, it could very well still be a tropical storm and have, a low pressure. And when you have lower pressures, that creates a bigger imbalance in the storm, that creates higher wind speed. So we could even have more, I guess, I don't want to make it, a claim on the intensity of the wind speeds, but we could have more of a wind impact in central North Carolina from the remnants of Michael than we did with Florence. Florence really lost a lot of strength as it was coming to shore, and its legacy was kind of the rainfall, but the wind speeds weren't really that, bad as advertised, because it really weakened as it approached shore. But here in North Carolina, we can expect maybe a little more wind from Michael than we saw with Florence. Might be a bit of a surprise factor with this storm, because it's going to wind up so quickly, and then it's going to take a long time to spin down, but it's going to be well off coast by the time it's weakened down to a tropical depression. So that's something to watch, kind of an interesting impact for this storm. So some power outages are possible. Isolated tornadoes are possible on the south side of the circulation, south and east side of the circulation. So this is something we have to monitor. It's going to cause a really wet day, and all this will be occurring in North Carolina on Thursday. So that's one key I want to point out here. Making a landfall on Wednesday, but North Carolina won't really be feeling the impacts of the remnants of Michael until Thursday. So our day here that we need to worry about is, anytime from late Wednesday into the end of the day Thursday is going to be kind of a messy day for us with lots of rain and a lot of wind. So I quickly want to look at, I guess I can show you the track in here. This is more of, the analysis of the conditions of the storm, but this will help to show the track. So here is that expected to intensify into a Category 2, 85 knot storm at 95 knot, and then up here 105 knots. That's about 120 miles per hour. So a major hurricane, and then making landfall as a major hurricane in the panhandle of Florida here. So this is an area that's very susceptible to these kind of storms, and it's not looking like a very good scenario for these areas. So it's something we have to really watch in terms of, the intensity of the storm and hitting an area that's very prone to tropical cyclones. And, if you have any friends or loved ones in that area in the panhandle of Florida, be sure they're aware of the situation. It's spun up very quick. In October, we can get a lot of storms that pop up here in the Western Caribbean, and it kind of zip into the Gulf of Mexico, and they have nowhere to go but to cross over land first. So this is a pretty common happening in the October months. The water cools down a lot slower than the land. So even though the land is starting to cool down in October, well, not in North Carolina this year, it should be, and it's going to be cooler in the next few days, but in October, you start to transition into the fall time temperatures with cooler weather. But the water, if you have a bath of water, if you're bathing your dog outside or something and have a kiddie pool full of water that's warm and sits in the sun all day, well, the air can cool down, but the water's going to take a lot longer to cool down. So the ocean does the same thing. It's just like a glorified bath. The water takes a long time to cool down, so there's this latency to where, you hear the peak of hurricane season is September and October. That's because the water is still warm from being heated in June and July. So the water takes a lot longer to, cool down and get back to, normal, well, not normal, but, marginal temperatures that don't support any kind of tropical activity. But the waters, have a lot more heat content. They have a higher specific heat. So it takes a lot more time for that water to cool down to where it is not conducive for tropical cyclones anymore. So that's my soapbox on the water heat content. But I wanted to jump over to here and look at, this is actually a map I threw together real quick. It's not the best thing, but it's something different to look at instead of, basic maps. But this is kind of a rainfall forecast. Some of the values are a little bit wonky here. But I've taken this off of the Weather Prediction Center's website, and just shows, the anticipated rainfall totals. And here up in North Carolina, these have gotten kind of messed up here for some reason. This is my first attempt at throwing this together real quick, but I tried something new and it didn't seem to work out. But at least it's, a fresh graphic we can experiment with in the future. But there's this contour extending up in here that's supposed to be 2 to 3 inches of rain, and then there's kind of a minimum up here in central North Carolina. But this is through, I think, 4 or 5 days, basically just showing, a widespread 1 to 2 inches across the state from the remnants. Down here, much higher amounts where Michael's, making its, primary impacts with its landfall down here, anywhere from, locally 7 inches to probably higher in isolated bands. But then as the remnants come up here, a widespread 1 to 2 inches, and you can kind of, replay this slide a couple of times and see, because I'm running out of time here on my timer, but for this recorder on the video. But overall, about 1 to 2 inches of rain and some gusty winds is what we can expect here in the Carolinas for Thursday. So I'm going to wrap this video up here, and I will have another video tomorrow outlining more impacts for the Carolinas. But for now, stay safe, and if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks.